content courses that are going to be released in our on-demand training platform are Azure Data Factory and Azure Machine Learning content. It's a bunch of really, really great stuff there. Those two are being released by my colleagues Manuel Quintana and Mitchell Pearson. They're going to be some really good courses coming up. And for many of you are pretty experienced with Power BI Desktop and the Power BI service. I'm assuming that goes along with that. And that gets updated pretty regularly on a monthly basis at the minimum, sometimes even weekly. And we try to keep up with all the new updates. We release new content showing all the new updates, how it works, and stay on top of it so none of our stuff really gets out of date. I am a technical editor of books. We are currently working on a book right now. We are wrapping it up. It's an introduction to Power BI book. It is really great content on all the new Power BI tips and tricks that are out there for beginners. So don't really have much more information on that currently, but we will be posting on that soon. But a bunch of us here work on it collaboratively, and it's really, really good stuff. I'm a presenter at some local user groups. I'm active in the community, and I not only present, I also help. JSSUG is the Jacksonville SQL Server user group, as well as I help out with a local Power BI user group here in Jacksonville. And lastly, I do blog. I blog at backtosql.wordpress.com. You can check it out there. I don't post blogs that often. I mainly post blogs on follow-ups of my webinars and other live events, or if something new comes out that I'm really interested in, I'll release a blog. And for instance, I will be releasing a blog probably next week to answer any follow-up questions that go along with this class. So if you have any questions or interested in any questions that people ask, make sure you follow my blog and I will post on that. I do also tweet. My Twitter is @backtosql, and I don't post that much. I send a couple updates out every day about new stuff that comes out with Power BI, SQL Server, or Azure, and I also tweet when I release a new blog. So check that out. And then lastly, my email is always available to anyone. If you would like to send me an email in regards to our training form or our webinars, or if you even just have questions about this class or things related to this class, or even things that are not even really related to what we're doing today, for any reason, if you want to contact me, feel free to. My email is provided here, inley@pragmaticworks.com. I'll show it again later at the end of the class. All right, so let's get to it. So Power BI Maps. So Power BI Maps is something that we could spend days on, going over all the different features we have within mapping. We could go over all the different types of maps, like bubble maps and shape maps and ArcGIS maps and all the different custom visual maps, but we simply don't have time to do all that, right? We just have 1 hour today, so we're going to try to power through as much of the content that we can that's easily accessible. That's one of the reasons also why I sent that question today for that poll of how many people are interested in advanced techniques with maps, because that is something that I will probably do a follow-up on now, because it looks like there's very high interest in that. So advanced techniques with maps is on my to-do list coming up, so make sure you stay following pragmaticworks.com, check out our webinars coming up or any other events that are coming up, and see when I'll be doing that advanced Power BI. I don't have an official date yet. You can also send me an email if you're curious about it. But anyways, we're going to be going over the different types of maps there are today, what use cases we have for mapping within Power BI, and then we're also going to go over some different best practices and tips and tricks that we have available for use in Power BI. So quick overview of different types of maps. We have the basic map within Power BI. This basic map is also a bubble map by default. It is a bubble map, is what the top picture is. And we also have a fill map picture on the screen. What the fill map does is essentially the same thing as a bubble map, except it fills up the entire area rather than just a bubble. We have shape maps. So shape maps have been in preview for, I don't even know how many months now, 6, 7, 8 months, something like that. Shape maps have been in preview. We're going to take a quick glance at shape maps later. In Power BI Desktop, there's also the last map that comes in baked into it is the ArcGIS map. This map we're not going to spend a ton of time in today. We're actually we're not even going to touch ArcGIS maps today because the demographic for ArcGIS mapping users is very small, because the ArcGIS map, the free version, has some use cases that are pretty good, but they're not, out of this world. But ArcGIS in general does require a license. It's very expensive. Not that people don't use it. It's just, that I guarantee the majority of people we have here, the vast majority, do not have access to ArcGIS licensing. So we're not going to cover that today specifically. And then, as well as all of that, there are over 10 different custom visual mapping tools that are available to us in the Office store. We're not going to touch those today either, because like I said, we could literally spend days working on maps, and we have an hour today. So primarily what we're going to be looking at today is the map and the fill map. Like I said, we're going to talk about the shape map for just a minute once we get there, but primarily we're going to be working in the map and fill map. All right, so when are we going to use maps? We're going to use maps when we are looking at different sales or production, and we want to look at it via a geographical area type. Now, this gives us a lot of information. And by the way, all the data, well, almost all of the data we're going to be using today is the AdventureWorks database that everyone has access to, anyone has access to. So it's all fictitious information. The pictures that I currently have on screen, these are all using AdventureWorks, all data from there. So we use maps when we look at different types of stuff like sales or production by geographical area, or even other metrics. How many people attended this event? And we can take a look at it, and because of looking at all this data, we might be able to find different geographical trends or geographical insights that we may not have noticed if we're looking at it in something like a tabular format. So if we're looking at a table with just numbers, like, okay, we have the most sales in these states. We have the most sales in Arizona, followed by Texas, followed by California, followed by New Mexico, and then Montana, et cetera, et cetera. If we're looking at it like that, we might not immediately make that correlation that says, hey, Western states are doing better. More specifically, the southwestern states, the ones that coincidentally are all bordering Mexico. Is there a reason for that? And we immediately get that question in our heads. Why are these southernmost states in the West having better sales than every other state in the country? Is it because of certain laws that are passed? Is it because of traffic? Because AdventureWorks, has a lot of like different products like bicycles and whatnot. Is it because of traffic reasons? Is it because of the weather? Is it just because of different flavor of the months, different trends that are going on? These are all things that immediately questions that pop in my head when I look at a map and see information like this. Because, I know how like California is and Texas is, right? They're pretty different as far as the culture goes, but for some reason their sales data is similar. So it would be interesting to find out why. All right, and then we're also going to go over some best practices later once we get into it as well. And some of the best practices include using hierarchies. Using hierarchies to really to start off being less ambiguous with our data. Ambiguity is the worst part about using maps. If you're ambiguous in your data at all, it's not going to represent your data correctly, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. I'll show some examples of that later. But hierarchies is the first step, or one of the steps we could take to getting less ambiguous data to get more exact results. We're going to look at how we could use a pre-made hierarchy that we can use that from our fields pane in Power BI. We can make hierarchies to show exactly what we want, or we could use ad hoc hierarchies that we could just drop into our field buckets that we have in each individual visual without manually creating a new hierarchy. We're also going to look at combining different fields together. We're going to look at combining fields in DAX and the query editor. This is pretty rudimentary stuff as far as that goes. But we're going to actually, take a little bit of the in-depth look at it as far as why combining fields is going to be so beneficial. So, for instance, the example we're going to use later is when we're looking at different cities. And for instance, Jacksonville. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, by the way. That's where I live currently, and it's where I work. And there are, if I remember correctly, 17 different Jacksonvilles in the United States. So if I search for the city of Jacksonville and see what comes up and how my sales are doing in Jacksonville, I'm not going to get accurate results because there's so many different Jacksonvilles, right? So we're going to look at combining fields like Jacksonville, comma, space, Florida, and Jacksonville, comma, space, North Carolina. We're going to learn how to do that and then be less ambiguous with our charts and our tape and our maps, and really narrow down exactly what we're looking for exactly. Last thing we're going to look at for best practices is data categorizations. We're going to learn the differences between the different types of categorizations, when it's impactful, when it's not. Even if it's not impactful, it's still best practice to make sure we categorize it properly, because all you have to do is measure one thing by a certain metric, and it breaks, it doesn't work, you can't figure out why. You release this, your end users find a way to break it, and you don't know how. It was working fine for you, whatever. But if you can cover your bases with categorizing everything properly, then you eliminate more issues from potentially happening. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. So we are going to go ahead and jump into Power BI. We have no more slides. Don't worry, we have no more slides for today. And let's get started here. All right, so we'll close that. I already have Power BI desktop currently open. And like I said, we are going to be using, let's see here. We are going to be using the AdventureWorks data today. So let's go ahead and get started here. Sorry, this thing is blocking my screen for a second. I'm just trying to fix it real quick. That's all right. All right, anyways, so I do have a Power BI desktop currently open. I already have some of these maps we're going to be looking at created. We are going to be making everything from scratch, but just as examples I have here. So on the right side of the screen, you can see that I do have just the AdventureWorks data open here. I've renamed it just because that's best practice, right? When we open new tables, open new queries, we're going to rename everything properly. One that you might not recognize is this lat long query that I currently have here. This is to show an example of using latitude and longitude within the mapping tools here, and we'll go ahead and showcase that first. So what I'm going to do is I already have this pre-made page open. And what this shows is just some data for just some miscellaneous events that are going on with certain attendees. So I'm going to check out the data view so everyone can see what I'm talking about. So in the data view, if I look at our lat long table, this has just some miscellaneous information that really doesn't mean anything. We have different locations or event locations called Madison, Kohl's Corporation, Art Museum, Harley-Davidson, and Chicago. Most of those things are very ambiguous, which means if we look at all our sales data or what attendee data in this scenario, attendee data for Kohl's Corporation or Art Museum, it is going to be so ambiguous, and it's going to try to look all over the world, not just United States. It will try to look all over the world for every Harley-Davidson, Art Museum, Kohl's Corp, etc. But we also have these latitude and longitude metrics that we can use and pinpoint exactly what we're looking for. All right, so let's go ahead and try that out. So like I said, this is what the example of what it looks like. This is the goal we're trying to make. So I'm going to go back to my blank page, and I'm going to start off by using the basic map, which is just called map in visualizations. And it is the one that is also a bubble map by default. I'm going to expand it open and drop some fields in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to drop the latitude and longitude fields in to the latitude and longitude buckets that are located here and here. Simple enough, I can just drag latitude into latitude, longitude into longitude, and it gives us our results that we are expecting as far as the locations go. So one thing to note about maps in Power BI Desktop, I meant to talk about this a little bit sooner, but one thing to note about maps in Power BI Desktop is that they all use, well, the map, the fill map, all use Bing Maps. What that means specifically is that in order to use those mapping tools, you have to be connected to the internet. If you're not connected to the internet, Bing Maps cannot run any queries. It doesn't work. One of the most common questions that I get whenever I do anything involving a map, whether it's a live session, webinar like this, private sessions, whatever, can you switch this to Google Maps? No, you cannot. This is a Microsoft product, and they say you are forced to use Bing whether you like it or not. So take that with a grain of salt. Now, something else to expand on this is that when you are using mapping features within Power BI Desktop, you have to be connected to the internet to use Bing Maps, right? But whenever you put in a location that is like a state or a city or your company name or whatever it may be, that sends a search query out to Bing using your internet, and it returns that information and it loads it into this map. When you use latitude and longitude, it does not do a query through Bing using the internet. Yes, you have to have internet to have this map loaded to actually generate the actual background of the map of all these locations. But to put in latitude and longitude, it does not send a query to Bing, just for the record there. So that is something to take note of. So we put in latitude and longitude, and it's got us our locations. So let's add some more fields to this. So for our location, for our legend, I'm going to add the event so we could tell which event it was apart from each other. And I'm going to add the attendees to the size of the bubbles. So now it's easy to tell that whatever this yellow bubble is, which if we hover over, we can tell it's Kohl's Corporation, has 5,000 attenders. Art Museum, easy to tell it's a runner-up with 3,000, Chicago, etc. One thing to note, in all visualizations within Power BI Desktop, for some reason, Microsoft feels like we all have eagle eye vision, and they make default text for everything extremely small. So if we look at this legend that you might not have even noticed is on the top left, that shows the color scheme for everything. It is very small, so I'm going to go ahead and bump that up so it's a little bit easier for us to read. So I'm with this map selected. I'm going to select the format paintbrush, go to legend, and move the text size up pretty much to double. And there we go. That's a lot easier to read. Makes a lot more sense now. We can easily see Kohl's Corp's yellow, our museum is teal, etc. So the whole point of this is just to showcase using latitude and longitude to get some exact locations. Because if we just tried to search by our event, remember our event field is just these locations like Harley Davidson, Kohl's Corp, Madison, etc. It's going to try to search the whole world for that. But because we have latitude and longitude, it gives us pinpoint, exact, definite locations that doesn't even need to send a query out to Bing. All right, so that is using latitude and longitude. Very useful if you have that information on hand. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at, we're going to spend a little bit of time using the map, which is just the regular bubble map, and we're not going to be using latitude longitude anymore from here on out. This is what the regular bubble map looks like. I also have a slicer on the top you can see with the different countries listed there. But we're going to be focusing most of our time on the map. Just real quick to show what we have showcasing here. We have just United States and our sales information by size and color saturation of each bubble. And the location is just looking at states currently. So if I hover over the state of Texas, I see the sales amount of gross sales amount for Texas is 5,718,000, etc. And I can look at all of these, and the size of the bubble as well as the color saturation is showing the difference in sales amount. You can see those two fields here. So we're going to go ahead and build this from scratch and actually expand on this quite a bit. All right. So we're going to make this what we see in front of us and expand on that quite a bit. So I'm going back to our original blank page, and we are going to go ahead and get started here. So I'm going to go ahead and load up a map, a bubble map, and expand it to the full screen so we can see it a little easier. And I'm going to start dropping fields in here. So the first field I want to add is I'm going to go to our geography table, and I am going to actually delete these real quick because I tested earlier. Delete these two little fields I have because we are about to make these shortly. So sorry for that. Delete. All right, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and with this visual selected, I'm going to drop in the state column into our table, and also the internet sales amount. So internet sales amount, I'm dropping that into the size. So sales amount, I'm dropping that into the size field. All right, so what that does, it gives us an accurate representation of all the different sales amounts within every single state or province right now in the world. And it's doing that all over the world right now is because we never actually clarified what country we want to look at. And we have all different ways of doing that, right? We have, like I mentioned in the PowerPoint slides, we can make hierarchies and we can combine fields. We could do those things. And we could also, like I showed in the previous example that I didn't talk about on the slides, we're making a simple slicer. Now, the problem with a slicer, even though it's definitely the easiest solution, you throw a slicer up, throw a country field in, boom, you can narrow it down. Well, if you're generating these reports and loading them to the Power BI service, oftentimes you don't want your end users to be able to slice and dice information. If you just want them to look at information for United States, if they work in the United States, you want to create this report where they can only see United States. If you want them just to see any country in Europe, you want them to not be able to change it off of Europe, right? So we're actually going to look at the different ways we could do this. So the first and foremost way we're going to take a look is we're going to manually create a hierarchy within our queries and be able to narrow this down, and then learn how to navigate through those hierarchies. Because navigating through those hierarchies just because you made it, just because they're there, doesn't mean they're easy or very intuitive to get through. But once we get through all the options, it's going to make so much sense. So first and foremost, let's go back into our geography query on the right side in our fields pane, and we're going to start making a hierarchy. So many of you probably know this, but in Power BI Desktop, there's at least 3 different ways you could do anything you could imagine. So any functionality that you know of you could do in Power BI Desktop, there's probably at least 2 more ways you could do it. So when creating hierarchies, there's several ways to do it. So what I'm probably going to do is do it my way, which is dragging and dropping, and that's easiest for me, right? So if I want a hierarchy, I want to be able to see the country, the state, and the city level. Because, like I said, we have the ambiguity problem of for instance, Jacksonville, Florida. If it's just called Jacksonville, then it's going to display all the Jacksonvilles in the country. Another issue without a hierarchy is that even if we search by state, or maybe not the state name, well, actually the state name would even cause this issue. For instance, there's a Georgia, the state, and Georgia, the country. So if we look at all our information for Georgia, if we have sales in both of those places, then it's going to display both of them together, and it's not going to be accurate, right? As well as even if you use state abbreviations, state abbreviation for California is CA, and the country abbreviation for Canada is CA. So that Bing query is going to try to search for CA, and it's going to pull up both California and Canada. So being as descriptive as possible is important here. So the levels I want my hierarchy are going to be country first, and then state, and then city. So what I could do is I could take my fields and drag them on top of each other to create this hierarchy. So what I'm going to do is, since I want state to be under country, I'm going to grab the state field and literally drop it on the country field. What this does, it creates an entire new column called country hierarchy, entire new field. You're not going to see this field in your data view or your query editor because it's a hierarchy. It's more of a visualization assistant for it to show itself as a new column here, even though it's technically not a new column. All right, so now we have this level, and yes, it is in sequential order, so the way you see it is the priority level. So countries first, and then state. Now we need to add city. So I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to grab city, drop it on country hierarchy, and it's going to put it below state. So country, state, city is the order we're looking at. Now, if you do this out of order at some point, you could always just drag and drop the fields within inside the hierarchy to reorder them however you'd like. So I'm going to go ahead and fix it back to how it should be, to country, and then state, and then city. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the state field from our location and show what it looks like when we drop city in. So when we drop the city field into our location, so there we go, city goes into location, it is showing all the cities all over the world. All these bubbles, this is not an accurate representation of anything because it is too big, too much information going on. It's not going to give us any kind of accurate information. All right, so when we actually use the hierarchy on the other hand, so I'm going to grab our hierarchy that we just created, drop it in a location, and now it is only showing the different countries we have sales information on, which is, in this case, Canada, North America. It has United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Australia. So those are all the countries we have sales information on. All right, so what we can do, there's a few ways we can navigate through this. So the first way to navigate through it, well, there's three drill down options we can use to navigate through this. The first drill down option says go to the next level in the hierarchy. What this is essentially going to do is going to basically ignore the hierarchy we created and simply show the next level as if we didn't have a hierarchy in place. So when I click it, when we're looking at state or province, it is showing everything. If you hover over any of the fields, it says state Texas and it shows sales amount. It doesn't show that it's part of the United States or anything. It does that for every country. I'm going to click the up arrow to go back to where we just were. And I'm going to click the next drill down option. It says instead of go down one level, it says expand down one level in the hierarchy. Now, at first glance, this is going to look literally exactly the same as the other one, but it does have one benefit here. It actually does start categorizing each state that belongs to whatever country it is in. So notice now it says country United States, states Texas, whereas before that country field wasn't there. It is helpful. It is more helpful than the last one, though it's not exactly what we want for this scenario. We want to be able to drill in to a specific country and get whatever information that we need. So I'm going to go back up one more level, one more time, and then I'm going to go to the top right of this map visualization. Top right has this little down arrow here. What this down arrow does, it turns on the drill down functionality. What this means is when it's on, it is highlighted, therefore we know it's on. And we can actually click on a country and it will drill specifically into that country and only show data that's within it. All right, so if I click on, I'm just clicking on something else first. I'm gonna click on Australia first. What it's done, now it is showing all the sales information for all the states that are within Australia. And to go back up a level, or I could zoom out and to show that it's not showing anything else. So to go back up a level, I'm gonna click this drill up button once again. This time I'm gonna go into North America. All right, so now we're in North America. We're looking at the state level of our hierarchy, right? So if I hover over Texas, it's going to say country, United States, state, Texas. Montana, country, United States, state, Montana. All right, so I can actually drill down one more time and look at the individual state and all the cities within that state because our hierarchy is country, state, city. So let's look at all our cities. So I'm going to click on California, and these are all the cities within California that we have sales information on. And it's only showing California. This is very helpful, right? Because then now you can actually, your end users can have a little bit more functionality with it. When you publish this out, if you have this drill mode option on, it's going to be on by default when you report it out, when it goes out to the service. So just by default, your end users, when they click on anything, it's going to drill into it. And as long as they know they could drill up via the drill up button, they could go back and actually look at a little bit more individual information. So it's very helpful, very handy using this hierarchy method. All right. So the next way we can do a hierarchy is the ad hoc hierarchy, that method I mentioned before, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close this country hierarchy from our location field well. This country hierarchy, we don't need it anymore. I'm just going to right click it and I'm going to select delete. Don't need it at all. Delete. So that's gone. So what happens when I drop country field into our location now? It shows all our country just like the top level of our hierarchy. But what we could do from here is we could keep adding fields to our location field well. So we could the next level in our hierarchy would be state. So I could grab state, drop it in this field well. After that would be city. I could drop it in this field well below state. Just like before, there is a specific order, so make sure you order it properly. So now you don't have a hierarchy in your fields pane. You have a hierarchy specifically, and it's only in this one visual that you currently have selected. So now I have this hierarchy set up. I could do the same drill down methods as before, and I'm just going to skip to the good one, which is the drill down mode. I'm going to turn drill down mode on. I can drill into North America. I could drill into California, and it'll literally have the same exact representation as it did before without even having to create a full hierarchy. So that's pretty good information there. It's very easy to use. You can just throw it together. That way you less clutter in your tables and your fields and whatnot if you only need it for specific things. And also a benefit of this is you can create custom hierarchies a little bit easier within your individual visuals. So there's that as well. So I'm going to drill up a level, and what some people don't realize is that this is another functionality we're going to be going over here on this bubble map, is what some people don't realize is this legend functionality that you have within these maps. And these legend functionalities can be pretty useful depending on your scenario, though I'd recommend not using it a majority of the time. There are niche situations where I would recommend using the legend functionality here. The reason being is because it turns all our circles into pie charts, and for us in the instructor and consultant world, we almost always really hate pie charts, like with a passion. That is a normal thing for us to be like, you have a pie chart, let's get rid of that. That's normal for us to automatically think that. But like I said, some people can use it. Generally, if you have 2 to maybe 4 fields that are relevant, I would say, all right, that's okay. All right, so let's go ahead and try it out so you can see what I mean. So I know one of the fields that I have here that doesn't have a million different fields that would go into it is the color field. So I just searched for the word colors in product. If I drop color into our legend here, it shows us, you know, the types of different sales that we have for each color. Now remember, this is just the AdventureWorks fictitious data. A lot of the data replicates. It's not really showing accurate because like all these states look the same, but this is just how it looks in the data set because it's fictitious. So we could easily see here that we hover over this, we can see red is the most common sales there, and then silver next, and yellow after that, and then you can even customize these colors to reflect exactly what you want. So I go to the format paintbrush icon and go to data colors, and I could actually change these to actually reflect it. So black, I could switch that to be black, I could switch blue to be blue, I could switch multicolored to be dark gray, or not applicable to be white, etc. I can move red to red, all that jazz. You can move all these colors around to actually, because if you're actually looking at colors, you might want to look at it in a representation that actually represents whatever color is getting sold. It doesn't really matter for us. This is just an example of what we're looking at here on this page, but that's a way you can do that. And for those of you who are happen to be curious, if you are a beginner or maybe an intermediate, to add to how I did this before, when I only had the state field on in the other window that I had, of only showing United States, all I did was click on the empty spot in the background, add a slicer, throw our country column in the slicer, country, and then I went to the format paintbrush. A lot of people don't know about this functionality. You go to the format paintbrush of a slicer, go to general, switch the orientation to horizontal, and you get this really neat little chiclet slicer type of slicer, and you can change the size of it, and its form fits to whatever size you have. If I put it across the top like this, it adds these different types of slicers we could click on for our countries, and I had it on United States, and voila, we have that. If you don't care if your users kind of thumb around all the different countries, by all means, you can do it this way, and it works. But there's just, you know, multiple methods you can do to do this. The problem with this way is you can't drill down into the state without adding a whole nother slicer on top of it, which starts to get a little confusing, right? Because there's all kinds of states. So if I add another slicer here, another slicer, and then put state in the well, and then you can leave a list format like this. If you wanted to put in the general horizontal again, you know, makes it similar to how we were just looking at it, form fits. Actually, probably harder to read this way because it goes alphabetical from left to right, or top to bottom, then left to right, so it makes it a little harder. But you always have this option, but then there's multi-selecting different slicers, and they're affecting each other, and people can mess it up and don't know what they're doing. So therefore, hierarchies would be a cleaner option, easier option, more, as long as you know how to drill up and drill down, absolutely more intuitive. So take that with a grain of salt and using slicers like this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and delete all these, and we will go to our next example. All right, so the next thing we're going to be looking at are fill maps, and this is an example of what a fill map looks like. Just like before, the fields I have in here are my color saturation is sales amount, and my location is state. It's literally the exact same stuff as the first example with the fill map, or with the bubble map, except it is fill map. There are different applications for this than the bubble map. Oftentimes when you're looking at the data set that we're looking at, something like a fill map would be preferable. It's not just random bubbles all over your screen. It looks a little better. It's cleaner. it's nice. It's nice. It's nice from the state level, but when you're looking at it on the city level, city boundaries can be a little bit wonky, which we're going to take a look at. So kind of take that with a grain of salt as well when you're choosing what type of map you're going to use. All right, so I'm going to go back to our first page, our blank page, and let's create a fill map real quick. All right, so these are the icons for the fill map here. Move this out of the way. So this is the icon for the fill map. This is fill map. The one next to it that you see, this one is the shape map, what we're going to spend just a minute on today. Just a minute. In this bottom right one here, there's a colorful globe. This is the ArcGIS map, which we're not going to spend time on today. This is the one that has all those licensing involved with it. The majority of people don't have access to. I don't even have ArcGIS mapping. But yeah, so we're going to be looking at, again, the fill map currently. Fill map is what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and click on fill map and expand this out to cover the whole screen. And let's start making our visualization here. So just like before, I can create a hierarchy for this. I could drag state into country to create this hierarchy. It just takes a second. There we go. City into state. And I could use this country hierarchy as a location, and sales amount. I'm just going to do a quick search for sales amount into our color saturation. Just like before, I could drill into it by selecting drill down mode. I could click any country I want, like North America, and it drills into it without any issues, right? Just like before. But when you go into the city level, when it gets a little wonky. So remember how when I clicked on California before, it gives all those bubbles, all the different little cities that we had sales in California in. But because city boundaries are a little bit weird in maps, right? Because they're not uniform. If we click on California, it looks a lot less. It looks like we've done a lot less. Because I clicked on California, I'm drilled into California, and these city boundaries are so tiny compared to the state. If we look up here, it looks like random splotches on the map. Not very great for looking at sales amount. You can absolutely may have reasons for looking at cities this way, but for the current data set, not really great for us. It doesn't really give us more information than we had before. If anything, it just looks sloppier. But like I said, looking at it on the state level, it looks fantastic. So, you know, choose what you want to do with either one of that, with either one of those. The legend on this also doesn't work the same. It works a little bit differently. That's not really something we're going to get into today because it's a little bit wonky and it takes a little too much time. And we are busy, so to speak, because we only had 1 hour today. All right, so, and I still wanted to make sure we leave enough time at the end to get some questions in. So I'm going to keep moving fast here. All right, so real quick, before we get into our other best practices, like combining different fields together in data categorizations, I'm going to show what shape map looks like. So this is a shape map. Shape map looks amazing, and if you don't currently have it on your Power BI desktop version, is because it is currently a preview feature. And if you're not aware of how preview features work, I'll do a quick rundown on how you get it loaded into your system. So if you go to File, Options and Settings, and Options within Power BI Desktop, it brings up your Options window. And within this Options window, you can select the Preview Features tab. When you select Preview Features, it gives you all the different things that are in preview in the Power BI Desktop. Preview means basically beta. It's getting beta tested. Anyone could look at it. Anyone could turn them on. It may or may not work as intended, being a preview or beta feature. So if you turn on Shape Map Visual, you would have to restart Power BI Desktop, and then this icon for Shape Map will be available for you. So this is what a shape map looks like. It does have drawbacks currently. So it looks great, right? I mean, it shows the entire United States, only United States, nothing extra. It even shows Alaska and Hawaii down at the bottom in a nice little visualizations. Obviously, AdventureWorks doesn't have any sales there, but it would show the saturation if it did, right? Because I have color saturation with the sales amount column in it to show pretty much the same as the fill map. One of the drawbacks to this is even if I deselect United States here, it's only showing United States. That is because currently within Shape Map, there is no world view by default. There is a way you could load a JSON file type into your Power BI desktop into the Shape Map visualization and get an entire world view, but it's a little bit cumbersome. I don't know how many of you work with JSON files before, and then you have to change some country codes around to actually all show 3, and it takes a little bit of work, but you can get it to work. But anyways, if you want to look at other countries, you absolutely can. If I go to the Format Paintbrush and go to Shape, I could click on this Maps drop down and look at different countries. And I know I have sales in Australia. I can flip it to Australia, shows it pretty nice. I could flip it to, I know I have sales in Germany, looks pretty nice, right? The shape map is beautiful. It's crisp, it's clean, it's great, but there is no world view, like I said, and it makes it a little odd. You can even change the projection views a little bit, depending on how you like to look at your maps. I just keep it on whatever's default. It looks fine to me. If you wanted to add that JSON file, you can click this Add Map button, and it's going to look for a JSON file type. In this case, this actually is this is a correct JSON to load to the sheet of world view. We're not going to do it now because it takes a little work to set up. But that is what a shape map is. Really cool if you get it functioning properly. It's not always the easiest thing in the world. All right, so right now I'm going to go back to our map tab, the one where we have the pre-made, already made fill map of our states here. So currently there are states loaded, and the size of the bubbles is sales amount, and the color saturation is sales amount as well. So what we're going to look at here is we're going to work at first is making new fields, making new columns by combining columns together, or concatenating columns together to create more descriptive fields. For instance, Jacksonville is not a good city name because there's like 17 in the United States. So what I'd like to do is make something that would look like Jacksonville, space Florida. That way, when Bing does a search for Jacksonville, space Florida, it knows exactly where to look, not to the other 16 Jacksonvilles that currently exist. All right, so to do that, the first method we're going to look at is using DAX and creating an actual DAX calculation to create a new formula, to create a new column. So with our geography table selected, I am already in the modeling tab, which is perfect, and I'm going to select new column. Okay, with this new column, I can name it whatever I like. I'm going to name it city, space state, because that's the format we're looking at, right? City, space state. And in Power BI Desktop, it is totally okay to name it whatever you like, with spaces, comma, symbols, whatever, as long as it makes sense. I know some of you probably SQL people or some other programming languages or even Excel users, you see a space and even a symbol and you're probably having a conniption. But in Power BI Desktop, it's okay because this is to upgrade our end user experience. Whatever makes most sense to our end users, our non-developers, is what we should always practice, all right? So that being said, to create this DAX calculation, my formula starts with city, space state equals. That means the column name is going to be city, space state. All right, and to start off so what I want to do to start off is to combine my city and state columns together. So to call a table or a column, you first start off by writing a single tick or a single quote, which leads us to our table name. Since we have geography selected, it's pretty smart. It knows that, IntelliSense knows that. And I can actually go and select the column that I want to select. So I can hit my down arrow key. I can select geography city because this is our first part of our column that we're creating. I can hit tab and it populates. And there is a function for concatenating you can use within here, but whenever you're just concatenating, always just use an ampersand. It does the same functionality as concatenate, exactly the same, except using concatenate, it only takes 2 fields. So you have to nest concatenate functions together for it to work. It's cumbersome, not worth it. Just use an ampersand, works totally fine. All right, so I'm gonna do the next thing for our state. So I'm gonna scroll down to geography state, and already there's gonna be an issue with this, right? There's gonna be an issue with this column that we're creating because it's simply concatenating the city column and the state column together. So when you look at it, it's not going to be Jacksonville, space Florida. It would be Jacksonville, Florida, all one word, no spaces, nothing, right? So what we could do is we could continue concatenating another string in here by using a double quote. Whenever you want to add a string specifically to anything in Power BI Desktop, use double quote. So I'm starting with double quote, space, in double quote, and then ampersand to do another concatenating. So geography and city, geography, city, and the string are concatenated together, and then that new string will then concatenate the state together. So when I hit enter, it's going to make a city-state column into our geography table, as you can see here. And instead of showing all the cities for the whole world in this map, I can close state and look at city-state, and it's not giving us proper information. Weird. We have more city-states in the country than these three things, right? This is showing Oregon City, Oregon. This is showing Idaho Falls, Idaho. And this is showing San Antonio, Texas, which that's definitely not where San Antonio is, right? Well, the reason why it's doing this is because Power BI Desktop is trying to categorize automatically and do a Bing query search on this field that it's trying to make an assumption on, and it's not working. So if we look at, if I select the city-state column, you know it's selected because it's highlighted in yellow, and go to the modeling tab, if you look at the data category, it's stating that it is uncategorized. It doesn't know what to look for. So if I click this drop down and take a look, there's options for address, city, continent, country, state, county, all this stuff, right? But what we're looking at is technically a city, though it's not just the name of a city, it's a city and a state. And there's no field for city and state here. So what we would choose is place. So what place does a regular Bing query search for anything, not just city and states. You could search for Harley Davidson as a place, and Bing search can pull that up, right? It would just do the nearest ones, or just all the ones in the country, all the ones in the world, or whatever. So when we recategorize that as a place, now it's going to populate all the cities that have in the United States, and specifically the United States without a hierarchy, because it's a city and the state together. And there's no other city-state combos that are exactly the same anywhere else in the world. That's what makes the states unique, right? So that is using DAX. We can do this another way in the query editor. So do that really quick. So in the query editor, to open that, you can select the Edit Queries button in Power BI Desktop. Brings into your query editor, as most of you should know. Once you're in your query editor, you go to Geography Table, and you can do the same exact thing here. Basically, except it's a lot easier, right? Except there's no writing code in the query editor because it is a GUI, and what this GUI does is it writes code for you on mouse clicks. That's exactly what it does. So we want to merge the city and state columns together. So I'm going to find our city column and our state column, which are located over here. So what I'm going to do is, before I merge them together, I'm actually going to duplicate them, because if I merge them together, the individual city column is going to be gone, the individual state column is going to be gone, right? So I need to duplicate them before I merge. So I'm going to duplicate city, and I'm going to duplicate state. There we go. Now I'm going to multi-select city and state together by holding Control and selecting both of them. Keep in mind the order does matter when you multi-select. If you select state first then city, it's going to come out state and then city. We selected city first. That's how we look at cities in the United States. So with these two multi-selected, I'm just going to right-click, select Merge Columns, and then it's going to ask me what type of separator I want. None, which would just mash them together, or do something else. There's comma, there's space, but there's no comma and space, which is how we read cities in the United States. So I'm going to select Custom, and the separator, I'm going to write a comma and a space. I know the space is a little bit hard to see there because I just typed it, but it is definitely there. New column name, I'm going to call it city, state 2. Hit OK. And it created that column just like we expect. So I'm going to go ahead and hit close and apply. It applies those changes out to our data set here. So now we have city state, which is the one we created with DAX, and we have city state 2, the one that we created in our M. We created it in M, aka the query editor. All right, so when I select city state 2, make sure it's highlighted yellow, go to the modeling tab. Again, data category uncategorized. So if I switch it to place, just like before, and I add that field in here instead, and the location, it's going to produce the literal same exact result as before, because they're literally the same exact columns, just created in different ways. Now, this also is a common question that gets asked very often is, Nick, if I can create them in DAX and I can create it in query editor using the M language, which one should I do? Is it more efficient to do one or the other? There is a recommendation. There is a best practice and rule of thumb whenever you could do both. That recommendation is to always, always, always create something in M if you can, using the query editor, not with DAX. Now DAX makes some calculations that you cannot do in M, and that's when you use DAX. But as a rule of thumb, if you could create something using the query editor, do it in the query editor, because the way the Vertipack engine, which is the engine that we're not going to really get into, compresses data, and for performance purposes, it compresses it first from the query editor and is most efficient from the query editor when it's loading to the Power BI desktop. So it's a rule of thumb. It's a lot more complicated than that, than any simple explanation, but you should always do it that way instead. That being said, in this scenario, it really doesn't matter, because that is only applied when you have millions and millions or hundreds of millions or even billions of rows, when you're actually going to notice a difference. This AdventureWorks data has 655 rows. It's not going to know a difference. It's only going to show 655 rows. You will never see a difference in this amount of rows. So whatever way you prefer on a small data set like this is what matters. All right. And we are pretty much out of time. I wish I had more time to show how to use that shape map, all this stuff. But what we do have, we have about 4 to 5 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and post them now if you haven't already. I'm going to go ahead and take a look and try to answer as many questions as possible. That being said, if you're done and you're ready to leave, I'm going to go ahead and show my contact information on screen. So if anyone has any more questions after class right now, you don't feel like asking them whatever, if I don't get to it, I will be posting a blog on this later on any questions I get asked, probably next week sometime, the beginning of next week or the end of this week. And you can always contact me via email, nlee@pragmaticworks.com. I will answer any questions of yours. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and look at some of these questions now. Can shape map show cities is one. Yes, shape map can show cities, but you need to use a JSON template that shows your city borders. For shape map, you can show all kinds of stuff. You can show election zones, like different counties or whatever, but those JSON files need to be created and imported in. Now, shape map doesn't just do countries and states and stuff in the world. In shape map, you could create anything. You could create a store layout and upload your store, your storefront, like a Walmart or whatever it is, into the shape map and section it off in different ways and zone it out however you want, and you can use it. It's possible. So there's that. I may have missed it, but can you use the shape map for the UK? Yes, it does have an option for UK and shape map. That is one of the options there. Let's see. What is the best map to use when mapping at a grain lower than postal code? For example, consider Los Angeles area with metrics by blocks within the LA postal codes. So when you're getting that specific, I would either use the bubble map if you do not need to know exact borders, and if the exact borders don't matter, I would use the regular map or bubble map, and you can zoom in quite far and see it. If not, the other best map to use that's at least by default here is the shape map. Shape map is technically better in all regards, but it is definitely advanced techniques using a shape map, creating a JSON file type that perfectly outlines your borders. So I can expand on that question a little bit further in my blog post. All right, let's see what else we got. Query editor versus DAX is better, but what about pulling from your own SQL into query editor? Is that better? Yes, that actually is better. Asker Zachary. Zachary, yes. If you're using like direct query or live import or whatever it is you want to use, if you're pulling it straight from your SQL server and you're using a SQL query for it, the rule of thumb I said is always do it in query editor before you do it in DAX. Well, technically, the earlier you make those changes, the better. So the most optimal way is directly from your data source first. And if you can't change it in your data source and you have to change it in Power BI, then change it in the query editor. And from there, then change it in DAX. So the sooner you could make that change, the better, the more compressed it will definitely be. All right, I have time for a couple more questions here. The visual used to do the shape map demo, is it a custom visual? If yes, what is the name of the visual? No, the shape map is strictly using the preview feature shape map. That's all it did. I loaded the AdventureWorks data set in there. I put the sales amount into color saturation and the states. I just put states in, and I switched the visual itself. If you look under the format paintbrush of the shape map, you can choose which country you want to look at. I chose United States, and it just populated. That's all I did for that. All right, what else do we got? Can we set default map to state rather than the world map? There is no way to do that. So if you're using the default map, which is the bubble map or the fill map, even for that matter, there is no way to look at just a state. You would have, if you wanted to look something specific like that, you would have to use a different custom visual or a shape map with a JSON file type that supports it. All right, probably do one more. Can we use county level in map? Absolutely. County is definitely usable within the map. For scenarios with these blanket scenarios using fictitious data like AdventureWorks, using county data doesn't really give us much information. It's not that great. But there's tons of data out there, obviously, like local data, looking things on a county basis. I recently did work for my local county here, which is Duval County, and we actually looked at all surrounding counties as well because it had to do with the police force here. And we're looking at different public works information that was going on, like people will call the police station for, in this county, for this many potholes and this many flooding and this many fires and etc. And we used the map visualization to map it out, and it worked great. We used the actual fill map for that because we were zoomed in enough to where we could actually see the differences there. So yeah, you can absolutely use counties. So I am extremely sorry if I did not get to your question today, but it will be answered, I promise you, and I will post it on my blog. I'll post on my Twitter when my blog goes live. And if you have any more questions that I didn't get to today, you're looking for a more of immediate answer, or if you have any general broad questions about Azure SQL, Power BI, Power BI Maps, or whatever it is, JSON file types, doesn't matter. Have any questions, feel free to ask me at any time, and I'll do my best to help you out. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure speaking with all of you today, and thank you so much for attending. I personally love working in Power BI. It's actually my favorite thing, despite all my handles having SQL in it. Power BI is my favorite thing. It is the hotness right now. I love it. It's great. Thank you all for attending and enjoying this, what I love doing so much as well. I hope all of you have a great rest of the day, and be sure to tune in for our future webinars that we do on the T's. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nick, so much. And as Nick was saying, this will all be previously recorded, and you guys will receive a link tomorrow in your email. So look out for the link. If you guys have any further questions, you guys have my email as well as Nick's. And thank you guys for joining the webinar. Have a good day.